We'll begin. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, David, for sponsoring the first breakfast. Do you have anything you want to sponsor it in honor of?
In honor of the shir.
In honor of the shir. Okay. In honor of the shir. Today's topic is, should we mourn the murder of Charlie Kirk? And related to that is, what is a righteous Gentile? So, I have some statements here just from different people that I found online. I'll start with just to read the stender of Erica Kirk, who spoke, I believe, yesterday or last night. There should be a few maybe we could share with somebody else. I'm sorry. And she spoke, and I listened to a little bit of it and saw her stender, and the picture on her stender, it just says, "May Charlie be received into the merciful arms of Jesus, our loving Savior." And the beginning of her speech, also she's praying to Jesus. She even says something about Jesus in the prayer. So I bring that up just to, I guess, explain why I would say that this is a question. Because although I think, as the Orthodox Union, the OU statement, clearly we're all, I think it supports this idea, and we all feel, I think, in mourning, not necessarily only because of this terrible tragedy, but we're also mourning this really sad state of affairs, that someone who, speaking publicly about a certain issue will be shot because of, we don't know the reason. We don't really even know for sure who's the person who shot them. But the fact that we have people who are voicing opinions and they get shot it's very it's alarming to have a state of affairs that people have to be careful. And people are being killed in public square or being attacked because I don't want to say because of, we don't really know, but we assume that there's some related, his stature in the political realm was related. So that's a sad state of affairs that I think we're all mourning. But the question I want to just hone in on more is, in general, halacha has much to say about the world, and that's the purpose of this year. We started last year, and I always say in the beginning that you don't have to trust what Lesher says. I like to just present to you the sources, and you make your own informed decision. So, although in the group someone was saying, this rabbi said this or that rabbi said that, it's great. You can make your own decision based on the sources. So, I think it's always good to be informed, look into the source material, and halacha has a lot to say about this question. What does it mean to be a righteous Gentile? We'll also try to address the question of whether Christianity, what's the status of Christianity, and what does it mean to be mourning for somebody who was a very devout Christian. So I just want to read quickly a statement that I found last night that I think also just sets the stage for this discussion. It's an article written by Rabbi Elliot Matthias on Aish.com, and he says that he knew Charlie, or he heard of him in 2013, and he really was very taken by him. I'll just quote a little bit from this article. He's not taking a halachic stance in this article, but he says that we can deeply believe in our own cause and fight for it vociferously without demonizing or ostracizing those we disagree with. It is shockingly sad to see the state of political discourse in America today. Politicians, media personalities, and social media influencers compete to paint their adversaries in the darkest possible light. Each side proclaims that the other is destroying the nation. So I think he's basically saying that the assassination was politically motivated. I don't know if that's obvious. I don't know. The person who was arrested, who was interrogated recently, was not I don't believe was a leftist. I don't know. It could be it was just a lunatic, someone who wanted to become famous, like John Lennon was killed. We don't really know. We're not sure yet, but some people are saying it was politically motivated. Let's assume that that's a possibility. So that's a very sad state of affairs, right? That we can't dialogue. We are shooting people that we disagree with. Again, I'm just saying for the record that we don't know for sure. But assuming that is the case, that's a sad state of affairs. So that, I think, is a reason to be mourning. Earlier this year, Liberator commentator Keith Olbermann posted, "Every Republican is complicit Everyone is a collaborator in the destruction of America. And on the other side, others, right, he says that Steve Bannon, the radical left are demons. They worship power and chaos. They hate God. They hate America. They hate you. And he says that Charlie Kirk stood for something else, which was conversation. He was known for setting up in the middle of a college campus and letting anyone engage in a debate. He offered the microphone to anyone who disagreed with him, though that person needed to be ready to have their ideas challenged. So I think that's an important lesson to be learned. And I'm not going to get into all the political debate over here. I know that many have what to say, but I just want to highlight that it's a sad state of affairs if, in fact, he was killed for politically motivated. And even if he wasn't, the fact that people are gunned down in a public discourse in a university is very sad, and we should mourn that before we move on to the halakhic question. Yes, Harry, you were going to say something?
No, I may have missed the point, but the whole point is his actions. Should we mourn him because of what he did up until? It's not the fact that.
So right. So I was just saying more generally, it's a sad state of affairs, and it's a terrible thing that a person is murdered. Now let's get to the question I think that Harry is bringing us to, which is the person themselves and halacha. How do we view this person? And it's not just him. It would be a general question for much of society. Let's say a devout Christian. How does halacha view that person? And are we sitting shiva? Are we going to have a kelmale? What exactly are we? What does it mean?
Why would you sit? You don't sit shiva for someone that's not your relative.
But I'm saying, what is when we say mourning? What is the hashkafa? We're not sitting shiva. We're not going to say kelmale. So what is in fact? How should we view these people? Like Harry said, in their lifetime. What's our relationship to them in their lifetime? And then that would tell us a little bit about how we should, I guess, there's no formal observance, right, like Meir said, but how should we think about this? How should we view this? What does the halacha say? Is there something that we can draw some conclusions? As I mentioned, you make the conclusions, I present the sources to you. So let's see. First of all, we have to ask the question, I think it was definitely thrown around. I don't remember which rabbi, but someone posted in the WhatsApp group that somebody said he was from the Chasidei Umos HaOlam, one of the righteous Gentiles of the world. So what is the category of Chasidei Umos HaOlam? What does that mean? So there was a term that's now used, I think, formally in the Holocaust Studies department area, or whatever area, that the righteous Gentiles of the world are those who saved Jews during the Holocaust. That is a very localized, specific, limited definition, but the definition emerges, I believe, from some sources in Chazal. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin we'll start with, in source number 1, Daf Kuf Yud Amud Beis. The Gemara in Sanhedrin has a debate over there between different Tanaim, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Akiva, but it says there that everyone agrees that Katane B'nei Rishai Ovdei Kochavim Divrei HaKol Ein Ba'in L'Olam Haba. The children of the evil, of the wicked of the world, do not have a share in the world to come. But Rashi comments on that Gemara, that's very, in other words, it's saying the wicked of the world don't have a share in the world to come. Even the children of the wicked of the world don't have a share in the world to come. However, Ti'ilu Chasidei Umos HaOlam Pligiba. Right? But it's a debate whether the Chasidei Umos HaOlam have a share in the world to come. And he quotes a Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Kuf Hey, which you can take a look at yourself in source number 3. It quotes a machlokes between Rabbi Yehoshua and Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yehoshua, we'll start with Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says, the pasuk, he bases it on a pasuk in Tehillim, that Kol Goyim Shochei Elokim Yeshuvu B'Shoim L'Shoala, that the wicked of the world will be turned back to the netherworld, and those are the nations of the world that forgot Hashem. So he says, those are Elu Poshe Yisrael. Those are the Jewish people who sinned. But Kol Goyim Shochei Elokim, what does it mean that they're the Goyim Shochei Elokim? That's Elu Poshe Ovdei Kochavim, the sinners of the nations of the world. Divri Rabbi Eliezer. And it seems to be that they would go to whatever Shu'ula or Shoala, they are going to the netherworld. Then Rabbi Yeshua says, Amar lo Rabbi Yeshua, V'chinemar b'chol goyim? Does it say all non-Jews go to the netherworld or go to be punished? No. It only says that the ones who forget Hashem, that's the ones who go. So therefore, Rabbi Yoshua, the way Rashi interprets Rabbi Yoshua in his comment on the Gemara on Kuf Yud, is that Rabbi Yoshua disagrees with Rabbi Eliezer and holds that there's a category of non-Jew that has a share in the world to come. And he even refers to them as Chasidei Umos Ha'olam. And the Rashi says that as well in the same Gemara on Daf Kuf Hey, that the ones who are Shochei Elokim, they don't go to Gan Eden, or they don't have a share in the world to come, but Avla Hashar Yesh Lahem Chelek. But others do have a Chelek in the world to come. This position is supported in the Rambam. It's not explicit in the Gemara, but Rashi interprets the Gemara that way. So you could say the Gemara says it, but Rambam says it explicitly as well. The Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva, Perek Gimel Halacha Hey, in source number 5, he says that Chasidi Umas Olam Yesh Lahem Chelek LaOlam Haba. The righteous of the nations of the world have a portion in the world to come. And like Rashi, the Kesef Mishnah comments on that this is in fact a machlokes, whether they have a share in the world to come, between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua, and the Rambam is paskening like Rabbi Yehoshua, that they do have a share in the world to come. Well, what are the righteous of the world, of the nations of the world? What are the Chasidei Umas Ha'olam? So there is a definition that is given by the Rambam. It's a very strict and specific definition, a limited definition. Let's look at it together. And this is going to be the question. Can we apply this definition to a non-Jew or a devout Christian living in 2025? And if they would be considered someone who has a share in the world to come, I think we could agree that even if we're not going to have, like Meir said, we're not going to sit Shiva, we're probably not going to have a Kalmali, but we would feel the loss of someone who was a righteous person.
Is he considered an Ovdei Avodah Zarah?
Very good. We're going to get to that. That's a very good question. So it's going to be dependent. The question would be, what is Christianity? And there's many forms of Christianity, but we'll get to that also. But that's a very important question. Can you be Chasidei Umas Ha'olam and be an Oved Avodah Zarah? We had a question and answer session with Rav Schechter on Friday, just rabbis, and someone asked this question, and he said, yes, you could be a Chasidei Umas Ha'olam and be an Oved Avodah Zarah. We'll get to that in the end. I don't know how you could say that, because one of the definitions of Chasidei Umas Ha'olam, as we'll see, is someone who follows the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, and they have to follow. They can't believe in Avodah Zarah. So we'll get to Rav Schechter's position, hopefully by the end of this year. It may take 2 shiurim. Maybe there are a lot of related topics. There's also a related topic of the 7 Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. Should we encourage that? If non-Jews are encouraging that, like many Christians are, they're encouraging some of them. So is that a positive thing? Okay, so let's see the Rambam's definition of Chasidei Umas Ha'olam, and you'll see that it's very, very limited. This is in source number 7, Hilchos Melachim, Perikas Halacha Yud Aleph. Kol makabel shev mitzvos v'nizar la'asosan. Harei michasidei Umas Ha'olam. Anyone who accepts upon themselves the 7 mitzvos b'nei Noach and is careful, precise in their observance of that, they are from the nations of the righteous of the world. The righteous of the nations of the world. V'yesh lo chelek u'olam haba. But then he says, look at this, another caveat. That they accepted and they did these mitzvos, these 7 commandments. Why? Because Hashem commanded it in the Torah. It was made known to them through Moshe Rabbeinu that the Noach's descendants were commanded before the Torah was given. But if they follow the 7 Noachide commandments because of logic, they come to that conclusion because it makes sense. The society functions better when you have people not murdering, not stealing. Not all of them fit exactly into it. How does it hurt a society if there's people who are over Avodah Zarah? So I heard some interesting theories about that paganism denied the divinity in humanity, and there's a lot of different theories that maybe it's related, but it's not. I think from its just from a at first glance, avodah zarah doesn't seem to be related to society functioning properly. Although we do see that Western society has overall, I guess you could say, has some sort of, in some ways progressed, in other ways not, but in some ways has progressed. And maybe we could say that society functions better with it. But either way, they came to the conclusion that these 7 mitzvos they should follow. Ein zeh ger toshav. Well, we're not going to get into that. It could be another shir also, but it's a related question about the status of a ger toshav. Rav Hirsch and the Meiri and others seem to imply that non-Jews today, Christians, could have the status of ger toshav, but maybe we'll have to get to that to a different time. But the main line here to focus in on here is ve'eno michasidei umas ha'olam v'lo michach mehem. They're not from the pious of the nations, the righteous of the nations, nor from their wise men. What does that mean, nor from their wise men? So there is an interesting girsa Rav Kook has in this. I think he has, instead of, I don't think I printed it. It was late last night. Wasn't sure if we'd get to it, but I decided to mention it because it's such a strange language. The Rav Kook has a different girsa here. I don't think everyone agrees to it, but he has Ella Mechach Mehem, I believe. That they're not from the Chasidim Olam, rather they're from their scholars, their wise men. But the simple reading and most girsos in the Rambam is that they're not very special at all. If they've come to that from their own conclusion, they're not Mechasidi Umus Olam, and they don't have a chelek in the world to come. So that's a very limited, definition of Chasidi Umus Olam. Very, very small category, because most Christians are not following it. I'm not an expert in Christian theology, but maybe you could argue that they're coming from the Old Testament. I don't know, but I think we could say it this way: many non-Jews in today's world, let's leave Christianity to the side for a moment, because that may be a question of if it's avodah zarah. Let's just call secular humanists or people who are atheists or anyone who just wants to be a good person. They come to it from their own intellectual discovery. They found that, and even if they come to these 7 same principles, they're not following it because Moshe Rabbeinu said it in Har Sinai. That's just totally not their mind space. Now, where did the Rambam get this from? It's always important to ask the question, right? What do the sources say? Where did the Rambam get this from? So interestingly, the Kesef Mishnah says that he made it up. Look at source number 8. Nira li she Rabbeinu Omar Kach misvar denavshe. That it's maybe it's he needed to say it. It's self evident, but he made it up. He basically came to this on his own. There were later sources that I found that dug up a Mishnah's Rabbi Eliezer. A Mishnah's Rabbi Eliezer that talks about Chasidim Umas Olam, that maybe the Rambam was coming from this Medrash. And because the Medrash says in source number 9, it talks about there are the Chasidei Umos Ha'olam and the Chasidei Yisrael. They're different, the Jewish righteous and the non-Jewish righteous. And then it does say at the end that Avol im asu sheva mitzvos v'omru mipi ploni shamanu. We heard it from some person. Omidas atzman, or they decided on their own. Shkein adas machras, that they felt that this was intellectually compelling. O shishitfu shem avodah zarah, or it was shituf. It was we'll see. Talk about the Trinity. It was some sort of partnership. Im asu kol Torah kula. Even if they followed all of the Torah, ein lochin schar ella ba'olam hazeh. They only take their reward in this world. In other words, they don't have a chelik in olam haba. But it sounds like for the Mishnah's Rabbi Eliezer, they do have some reward in this world. Maybe he means you live a better life when you don't steal, murder, adultery, all that. Maybe that's what he means. Or it just means they actually have some reward, whatever it means, schar olam hazeh, but not olam haba, because they're not michasi umas olam. So perhaps the Rambam is coming from this Mishnah's Rabbi Eliezer. There's a very interesting letter that you may see quoted in some places, that's found in some printings of the Igeres HaRambam. And this letter seems to have no bearing on anything that we just said. It has no relationship to it because it's a completely different position that is said in the name of the Rambam. And I'll just, spoiler alert, Rav Yitzchak Shelat has a version of the Igeres Rambam, and he has this in his section, Igeres Misu Pakot. They're doubtful of their authenticity of the Rambam, and he argues that it's very likely this is a forgery or it's not authentically the Rambam. But let's read the letter. It's a letter that is addressed to Chasidei Halevi, letter to Chasdei Halevi. This is a translation from Professor Isidore Tursky, I'm a Maimonides reader. I find it fascinating that he was a major academic, and he doesn't make any asterisk or note or anything like this that there are reasons to doubt the authenticity of this letter, but it wasn't the goal of the Maimonides reader, whatever it is. But take a look at what this letter says. It's a letter that is addressed to this person.
Why are they saying that it's forgery?
We'll see in a second. First of all, we just read some of the Rambam, so you'll see this is not going to fit with what we just said from the Rambam. It's going to be very...
Is it Ramban or
Rambam, Maimonides. This letter is probably the most liberal application of Chasidei Umos HaOlam there can be. And if the Rambam wrote it, it doesn't fit with anything else that he wrote. And there's other reasons why. They don't talk about the introduction to this letter in this, but in the next source, Rav Shelat talks about some of the issues. So let's just read the letter together in English. Source number 11. As to your questions about the nations, know that the Lord desires the heart, and that the intention of the heart is the measure of all things. In other words, whatever you have in mind, whatever you want, whatever feels, your heart feels. And he quotes the Gemara in Sanhedrin, the Chasidim Umas HaOlam. He says, if they have acquired what can be acquired of the knowledge of God, if they ennoble their souls with worthy qualities, there is no doubt that every man who ennobles his soul with excellent morals and wisdom based on the faith in God certainly belongs to the men of the world to come. That is why our sages said, even a non-Jew who studies the Torah of our teacher Moses resembles a high priest. What is essential is nothing else than that one tries to elevate his soul toward God through the Torah. Nothing else. All you need is basically, you try to be a good person. You try to get close to God. That's it. Okay, there's more to say here, but there is no doubt that the patriarchs, as well as Noah and Adam, who obviously did not observe the Torah, by no means became denizens of Gehenna. Means they didn't go to Gehenna. On the contrary, as they achieve what pertains to the ennoblement of man, they are raised aloft. All this cannot be secured by fasting, praying, and lamentation. If knowledge and true faith are absent, because in such behavior, God can be near to the mouth but far from the heart. So the basis of all things is knowledge that nothing is eternal save God alone. So basically, if you want to get close to God, you believe in God, you're trying to elevate your soul, you're from the righteous of the nations of the world. What's missing from this? Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. Thank you, Josh. What else is missing from this? Not only Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach observance, but believing that the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach came from Moshe Rabbeinu. And they're almost not the same person. How could this letter be the Rambam? And that's what Rav Shelat points out, that also the style of the letter, I'm not an expert in Maimonides' writing styles, but the style of the letter is it's not similar to the way the Rambam writes. And if you want to take a look at this article in source number 12, I'll just summarize for you. It says, Dvarim muzarim elu machshidim es haigeres beziyuf. There's very strange things that make us suspect that this letter is not genuine. Shkin kama timios gedolos olos me'alian. There's many very, very strange things about this letter. First of all, the story is not a letter written to the letter is actually not written by the Rambam. According to this, I didn't quote it. It doesn't have it in the Maimonides reader, but I think it's in the original Igeres Rambam that they found this letter. It's a student of the Rambam that said that this fellow Chasdei Halevi wrote to the Rambam, and the Rambam told him, "Don't publish this letter." And then the student writes the letter to this other person. So the whole story is very strange. And we know that the Rambam has these works that he spent years and years and years on. The Mishnah Torah, I think it was 14 years. And it doesn't fit with anything in its style, in its content, the origin of the letter, even by the letter's own claim. In other words, it tells you about the origin of the letter. It doesn't come from the Rambam, it comes from the student. It has strange, historical context. So it's very unclear. We can't say definitively, but Rav Shelat says and he's an expert, very established expert in the Rambam's writings. He says it's very suspicious and very much doubtful that this is the Rambam.
So I looked at ChatGPT to see what the Rambam holds on do mitzvahs need kavanah.
Okay.
Right? So he says mitzvahs do need kavanah.
Yeah.
So he's saying that in both cases, meaning
Mitzvah Srichas Kavana is a different sugya by Jews also, but it's interesting. Okay, maybe it's related.
In both cases, he's saying
Yeah.
that you have to have knowledge and really kavanah on your heart that that you believe in the Shabbat mitzvahs or you believe in
So
God.
this is the thing ChatGPT doesn't really understand. There's a difference between kavana that I'm doing a mitzvah, but then there's another question, which is who's mitzvah? Like what's the question generally of the Rambam Shita and the Chasidi Umas Olam is what is the basis of the 7 mitzvahs B'nai Noach? They could know that they're doing a mitzvah. I guess you could say it's related. I don't know. I would say that they're two different sugyas. That one is like you're doing I guess you have to have it's like 2 levels of kavanah. You have to have this general awareness that this comes from Sinai, and then when you're doing a mitzvah, you have this specific kavanah that's a mitzvah. But the first step is you have to believe that there's something called Sinai. There was revelation, and included in this revelation are these 7 mitzvahs b'nai Noach for non-Jews. Now, obviously, yes, there were commanded before, so we have to get into how does that work. If the non-Jewish world was commanded in 7 mitzvahs b'nai Noach before the Torah, okay, it's a bigger question how this exactly works. But the Rambam says it has to be on some level related to Torah's Moshe. Okay, there's a little bit more to discuss in the Rambam Shita, but I see that it's getting a little bit late. I'll summarize a little bit for you. The Rambam says, okay, fine. So that's topic number 1. Topic number 2, we have to now ask the question: is Christianity avodah zarah? So let's look through. We're going to have to try to do 3 different shitos in the Rishonim: Rambam, Meiri, and Tosfos, and then we'll see how we paskin halacha l'maisa, and that would affect, I think, our position on Charlie Kirk or other devout Christians who pray to Yeshu. So the Rambam writes, this is an uncensored version in his Perush HaMishnayos.
Our rabbi is also on the board of the Christian Jewish.
The Canadian Christian, right? Yeah,
I think it's global. No?
could be. Could be. It's global. He's definitely involved in the Christian branch too. I hear you. There's definitely reason to partner with allies who are help. I think much of the partnership has to do with anti-Semitism, right? I think that I forgot which organization, but they put flags on the front of our shul. So there are people who are friends of the Jewish people, friends of Israel. But the question is the halachic status of someone who is Christian.
So you not be able to partner with someone if they are actually.
It could be, yeah. It's a machlokes. We'll have to see. We'll have to see.
And they're different groupings.
Different groups, different strands of Christianity. Correct. So the Rambam says that's why it's good. I'm not going to be rendering a decision. I'm just going to show you the sources, and you could see what for yourself. So the Rambam says in the uncensored version in the Perush HaMishnayos, you'll see why it was censored in Avodah Zarah. He says, "V'da, you should know shezos ha'uma hanotzris ha'omedes b'tainas hamashiach." You should know that the Christian nation, which stands on the claim of someone who claimed to be Messiah, he says that they switched around, right? They have differences in their different sects, that there's different kinds of sects of Christianity, but he says, even though there's differences, kulam ovdei avodah zarah. they're all Oved Avodah Zarah. And he says, Kach Bir HaTalmud, that's what the Talmud says. It's very definitive ruling from the Rambam. And the Rambam says in Hilchos Avodah Zarah, Perek Tes Halacha Dalet as well.
Can't engage in commerce with them.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
It's pretty big.
The Rambam says you can't engage in commerce with them in Hilchos Avodah Zarah. Hanotzrim Ovdei Avodah Zarah Heim. V'Yamarishon Hu Yom Idam, that the Sunday is their holiday. Lefikach Asr Laseis V'Liseis Imayim. You can't do Masa Umatim with them. You can't do business with them. Be'eretz Yisrael, in Eretz Yisrael. Now, it could be outside of Eretz Yisrael. Maybe it's different. But that's all. I guess the most extreme position in the Rishonim is the position of the Rambam. There's another position.
But this is not because of the Trinity or anything like this. It's just because they say he's Mashiach. No, right, but it's driven by the claim that he's the Mashiach.
Rambam.
Someone says they're Mashiach and they're not Mashiach according to Yiddishkeit, then that's Avodah Zarah.
Rambam does seem to say that he focuses on the Mashiach piece, but in other places, the Rishonim discuss this question of the Trinity.
Because one could say that anyone,
right.
And there's lots of examples.
Yes.
Current examples in Judaism where
yes.
where
Rav Shechter said that. Rav Shechter said that explicitly. Yes. As Rav Shechter said, if someone davens to a dead Rebbe, they daven to him, not to say that he was. He says that's a different question. That's a different question of what they actually mean. Okay, so but let's just say in a theoretical world, somebody prays to a dead person, and they pray to that person. I'm just quoting Rav Shechter. He said that's Avodah Zarah.
Okay, that's any dead person.
So you can't pray it like a kever?
So I think we gave a shir on this before. I believe we did, but the general perspective is we're praying to Hashem, and we're inspired by this person's life, or like Dovi was saying, there's such a thing called a Melitz Yosher. We're not praying to them. We're asking them to advocate. It's a little bit of a different topic, but it's a good point. The Rambam doesn't seem to mention anything in this, at least over here. His issue is, I don't know, because he's not saying that they claim to be Mashiach, and that's why they're Avodah Zarah. He's not. He's just commenting on the Christian faith. The Christian faith, which is based on this claim that he's the Messiah, that's Avodah Zarah. He doesn't tell us why. He just tells us you're not allowed. So, how do we define the Christian faith? He defines it based on this claim of the Messiah, and their day of their holiday is Sunday. So, what is the heter, or is there a heter? And like Dovi was saying, partnerships.
I shouldn't talk so much.
It's okay. We want to hear from you.
Like Charlie Kirk. And his people in his movement were actually moving more to like a Sabbath observance.
Yeah, apparently he encouraged people to be more
the original.
Yeah, but not only that. I think there are Seventh Day Adventists. There are people that don't necessarily keep the first, only Sunday. But either way, the Rambam is the most, I think, definitive shita that we're going to discuss today. That Christianity is Avodah Zarah. He doesn't mince words. That's what it is. Now, as Dovi was saying, many people partner in different issues, and whether it's business or political arena, and how can they do that? So this is all based on a Tosfos, or there's other shitas, maybe the Meirias if we'll have time for it, but it's quoted in Halacha, the Tosfos in Sanhedrin. Shitas HaTosfos Sanhedrin is the main purpose of not doing business with them is that they're going to swear, and if they swear, they'll swear to their God. And then you're over Ilifnei Iver, Lositin Michshol, you're placing a stumbling block in front of someone else, causing them to swear by their Avodah Zarah. So that's why you don't do business with them. So first of all, you could say, well, they don't really swear today. But the Tosfos says, it's not Lifnei Iver. Look at source number 15. The Bnei Noach, Lo Hushuru Al Kach. Because non-Jews are not... Oh, I skipped the line, I'm sorry. Afal Pishe Mishtatvin Shem Shemayim V'Davar Acher. He says, even though they have shita, they believe in a partnership of God and something else, it's not. We haven't found that this is usher to believe in shituf. or cause others to believe in this. There's no problem with Iver causing them to swear. Because B'nai Noach, non-Jews are not commanded against believing in partnership, the Trinity, or any kind of God and something else. And this is quoted in the Ramah. In his comment on Orach Chaim, Siman Kuf Nun Zayin, the Ramah quotes from these Rishonim. He quotes also from the Ran and Rabbeinu Yeruchim and the Tosfos. And he quotes this and says, even if they mention Avodah Zarah, they'll say Jesus or they'll say whatever they're going to say. What's their kavanah? They have in mind whoever created the heavens and the earth. But the Lord, remember the Lord. They group together God and other players that are involved. That's the Ramah's psak. The note of Yehuda has a little bit of a different take on it. He has a limited version of this Tosus, or a limited version of understanding of the Tosus and the Ramah. But it seems like many poskim rely on this Ramah, which is coming from the Tosos, which is that yes, Jews are not allowed to believe in the Trinity, but non-Jews are not commanded to believe in one God and no one else. They could have this concept of a partnership. I guess even the more broad heter, which some rely upon, is the Meiri. I don't think we have time to go through the entire sheet of the Meiri, but I'll just tell you the basic idea is the Meiri distinguishes between pagans or Akum and Ovid Avodah Zarah of the ancient world and what he calls today the people who are Gedurim Bidarke Hadasos. They are bound or given laws or believe in this idea of legal or faith that is let's call it the ways of faith. And the people who are Gedur B'Darkei Dasos, he has many different places in his Sefer. He applies this even to Notzrim, that the Notzrim of today are different than the Notzrim in the Gemara, and they're girded or bound by the ways of religion, and they don't have the same status of Ovid Avodah Zarah. We could treat them, he even says we could treat them like Jews in regards to business dealings. So that's the three different shittas in the Rishonim. Rambam, they're Ovid Avodah Zarah. Meiri, they're not. Tosos, they're not mechuyev to believe in only one God. It's okay if they have shituf. We don't believe in that, but they don't have the obligation to reject shituf. What do we hold today? So it's interesting. What I think Tzvi asked, or David, I forgot. Someone on the side said, "Well, if you tell me they're Chassidim Umas Olam, let's say we're going to take a more broad perspective to it, or let's say we'll believe their original belief comes from the Old Testament, and they'll believe in the 7 mitzvahs B'nai Noach. But how could you tell me they're righteous Gentiles and they're doing good and they believe in morality? How can you say they're Chassidi Umas Ha'olam? Even if we're not going to go with the Rambam's limited definition of it, how can you say they're Chassidi Umas Ha'olam and Ovid Avodah Zarah? So if you take the position of Meiri, you have no problem, because Meiri is the one, I really oversimplified it, skirted through it very fast, but he says that the Christians today are not the same as the Christians of the ancient Notzrim, what he calls, and they're girded by, or they're, I have to find a better word for Gedurim, but they're bound by the ways of religion, but they have the same status as Jews. So then you have no contradiction. You could have someone who's a Christian who could be Mechasidi Umas Ha'olam. If you take the position of the Rambam, I think you're really stuck. So in this question and answer with Rav Shechter, he said that Rav Soloveitchik said in the name of his grandfather, Rav Chaim, many times, that the Ramah, who quotes from the Tosfos that says they're not muzar on Shituf, is incorrect. It's incorrect. I'm not surprised because, it's just the style of Rav Chaim to go with the Rambam or to go with a more limited understanding. So that's what he said, and because of that, Rav Shechter, interesting, said that you could be a Chassidi Umas Olam and be of Ovid Avodah Zarah. I don't know. Again, I didn't have a chance to ask him, But that's what he said. I can tell you that's what he said. And I think most poskim today, especially those who are involved with allying with people who support the state of Israel or help us with issues of anti-Semitism, they're very much either in the Meiri camp, that they're different today, or they're not Muzar and Shituf, and therefore there's a lot more leeway. But if you go with the Rambam, if you're a strict Rambam person, it'll be more problematic.
Or like early Christianity was much more pagan. Like all the things
Right.
that they did, the rituals,
Yeah.
pagan, very little sort of pagan remnants.
Right.
Even the Trinity concept, the idea that there's a physical manifestation of God, I mean, we have that as well.
So Rav Schechter's definition was, and he mentioned this about other sects today, even in Judaism, if you pray to Yeshu, he said if they pray to him, that's Avodah Zarah. That's how that was his definition, a very simple definition. But you're right, Rabbi David Bleich has a long article where he tries to show that the Meiri was exposed to certain kinds of Christians, which led him to believe one thing, but other Christians are not. I'm not an expert in Christian theology, but it is important to define your terms and figure out what is Shitov. Is it really what they believe today? I would just note that I think most modern poskim are relying on this Ramah. It's quoted in Shulchan Aruch. There is a Tosos, a Meiri. These are sources. If you take a Rambam approach, you're going to be much more limited. So I would just finish off by saying that I'll share with you one last source. The Rambam. The reason why I have these here today is in your source sheet number 21. It's a censored version of the Rambam. The same Rambam who says that the Christianity is Avodah Zarah, you can't have anything to do with them, and he says very strong language. The same Rambam writes in the end of Hilchos Malachim, Perek Yud Aleph, it's censored. Maybe if you want to take a look, if you want to see it, so you don't have to believe me, but it's not on your source sheet because it's censored from the version that's in the online. The Rambam writes, he says, even though, first of all, he says that what's Mashiach? He says in Halacha Daled, Perek Yud Aleph Halacha Daled, there's someone who comes from Melech Beis David. He comes from the house of the Davidic dynasty, and he brings all of the people to do Torah and mitzvos, and he defeats the enemies in war. B'cheskas Shu Mashiach. We assume that he's Mashiach. But if he dies, he says no, and he can't be Mashiach. Then he says, Af Yeshu Hanotzri She Dam Mashiach. He says, no, Yeshu seemed like maybe he was Mashiach. V'nerag b'Beis-Din. He was killed in Beis-Din. You can see why this was censored. Kvar nisnam b'bo Daniel. Daniel already spoke about this. He goes into Daniel, okay? And he says this is a great michshol, this is a great mistake. And it caused many Jewish people to go off from the path of our faith. But then look at this line here, okay? But the thoughts of God, man cannot grasp. Our ways are not His, and our thoughts are not His. All the ways of Jesus and this, the Ishmaelite, who is that? Anyone? Muhammad. He says, Sha'amad Achrov, right? Muhammad came after Jesus. Inon ela liasher derech lemelech HaMashiach. The reason why they came into existence is to prepare the way for the Mashiach. Ulatakin es ha'olam kulo. And to perfect the world, la'avodas Hashem b'yachad. So that everyone serves God together. And then he quotes Psukim to support this, that everyone should be Shechem Echad, la'avdu Shechem Echad, to serve God as one people or one community. And then he says, how is this possible? Because because the world's full. We tend to think in a Western secular society that there's all these atheists, but the majority of the world, I think, if I'm not mistaken, or billions of people, let's just say that, billions of people are Christian and Muslim. So the world's talking about mitzvos, they're talking about Torah, they're talking about these ideas of the Messiah. However, he says, obviously we don't believe in of what they're saying, but they're preparing the world for this conversation, this progression. He says, even in these far away, in these far out islands, people are talking about this, and people who are totally, they are uncircumcised heart, which means they're mistaken, and but they're nosim v'nosim b'dvar melu b'mitzvos haTorah. He says they're talking about the Torah, they're talking about religious things, and then he says that they don't they say things which are incorrect, etc. And the ideas of Mashiach are nistaros. There are certain things that are hidden, and Mashiach will uncover them, etc. So what's the Rambam saying? The Rambam is saying that, and I think this is a sort of an appropriate perspective to end this year with. The Rambam is saying, yes, they're avodah zarah. So he's the most extreme in terms of the halacha. At the same time, we can see that the world is progressing in a certain direction, and he's saying this, that even though they're avodah zarah, but it brings the world a little bit closer to the Messianic era, because now the world's talking about monotheism, the world's talking about religion. Maybe they got things wrong, maybe we don't agree with the details, but overall, these movements have, he said, like Dovi was saying, they've moved away from paganism, and that's a step towards the redemption. So I think someone like Charlie Kirk, who was promoting certain values that were positive, and there are many devout Christians, what they're doing, even if we take the most extreme position, and that it's avodah zarah, there's still, I think, some historical value to what they're doing, and there's still a moral value. And then I think, again, he can leave it to you, but I think it's a sad thing that someone who was murdered in cold blood, someone who was, whether they're Chassidim Umas Olam or not, still they're moving history in a direction, the Rambam tells us, in a direction that is positive. So that's how we end the shir. I'll leave it to you to make the final decision, but that's the source material for today. Everyone have a wonderful day and a good week.
It's interesting.